So some people love it, some people hate it. What is it that I'm talking about? It's gonna be cardio. And I'm gonna explain why, no matter what your goal is, what phase in your program you are, why cardio is a necessary tool and factor for your success. What I mean by cardio is ultimately gonna be cardiovascular exercise. Exercise that gets a heart rate up, that is designed and targeted specifically for that. I'm going to relate this to, if that's even a word, to cardiovascular exercise for performance, right? So whether that's to run a certain speed, run a certain distance, whatever it may be. I'm trying to put that to the side. We're solely talking about cardiovascular exercise like an elliptical or treadmill or Stairmaster or something like that for the purpose of aesthetic gains, fat loss, etc. So first and foremost, we need to understand that the heart is a muscle as well. So as you train it or it gets detrained, it will become more or less efficient. The reason why that is important is a heart essentially pumps blood, which carries nutrients and oxygen to tissues, and more importantly, muscles and the brain. So if you have a less efficient pump, it is going to take a lot more effort for that to happen, and you're going to get less of that nutrient and oxygen flow to the muscles and brain. Quite simply put, firstly, as you get larger, as you put on more muscle, and of course as you put on more fat, that heart is going to need to get stronger. You do not want that heart to have to output that with the same size and strength that it has, because it starts to get overworked. So think about a muscle getting pushed to failure. Your heart doesn't just work for a set, right? It works in the long term. So over time, having that pump constantly have to work harder than it really needs to can cause damage to the cells and tissues, and that's where a lot of the cardiovascular disease and problems come from. So now that we understand what the purpose of the heart is and what cardiovascular exercise is, let's talk about when to implement it and how it can be implemented. First and foremost, cardio should be implemented no matter the goal, because we're not looking at it, hey, I want to be able to do, a certain amount of mileage or, not be out of breath while walking upstairs. We want to take the performance benefit from it as it pertains to training and to fat loss. So let's talk about training. Lifting weights does raise your heart rate, but it is not a form of cardiovascular exercise because it's very acute. You need something where the heart rate needs to be heightened and sustained for a longer term. That is how you create that adaptation. So with a muscle, you want to create a heavy amount of load, right, in a certain amount of repetitions, and it's in a short span. The heart needs to be longer. The reason why this benefits you so much is, again, like I spoke about, getting the blood and the nutrients into the muscle as efficiently and quickly as possible. That's number one. In addition, blood also takes the toxins and the byproducts of muscle contractions and training out and the acids, and it brings it back in through filtration. So that pump not only provides the necessary things forward, but also takes away, right, and creates a new set that allows you to continue to push forward, okay? So as you get heavier and as you get bigger, you need that heart to also increase in size and strength due to training, not to have ventricular hypertrophy due to steroids or from that heart having to work too hard. There will be a natural increase in the heart size just from day to day, but we don't want that to necessarily be just because of the environmental factors that we're in. Second, when it comes to digestion, you have to understand the way that the intestines work and how that food gets pushed through the system is through muscle contractions of the intestines. Okay, so if you have good blood flow and you have blood flowing through there, that's why digestive walks and things of that nature are good to have. It helps to push that food through and not let it sit, ferment, and cause more damage and leakage, right? That's the second benefit. Third is going to be your ability to obviously have more passive activity, right? The more passive activity, the more calories you're burning, the more that you can eat to a point, right? We don't want to do 6 hours of cardio a day so we can eat 15,000 calories, right? There is a diminishing return on that. But having that passive activity allows you to do that. And then last but not least, going back to the recovery aspect, the more active you are, the more blood flow that you have outside of the training session, the more ability that you have to recover. So that's why in the off season, no matter what it is, you need to have some amount of cardio. I usually recommend no less than about 80 to 100 minutes per week, split into about 3 or 4 sessions. It's pretty good. You don't need to be doing it every day. I'll talk about fasted and unfasted in a separate conversation about this. But generally that is going to be my minimal guideline. So at the very least, you should have that. I don't think steps are an appropriate allocation for the specific cardiovascular exercise. It is a good idea for everything else, but I do think that you need to have some sort of step goal as well to keep you active. Because again, remember, the cardiovascular exercise is acute for a shorter amount of time, right? You want to be active throughout the whole amount of the day. Now, When it comes to fat loss, obviously cardiovascular exercise is going to be important, right? It is another added way to increase calorie expenditure. You are not going to get a lot of calorie expenditure from weight training. It's just not possible because you are moving a lot of weight, but a very short distance. The amount of weight moved over a distance is going to directly correlate to the amount of calories burned. So if you move a large body like this over a long distance, it is going to create more energy that is being used rather than lifting a 100-pound barbell, 6 inches to a foot or whatever it is, okay? In addition, that blood flow, again, helps to reoxygenate not just the muscles, but the fat tissue. You want blood to get to the fat tissue so fat can enter the blood and be used by the cells, right? Ultimately, at the end of the day, cardio is something that should be always implemented. As we get more sedentary in life, it becomes harder. So if you're a coach, you need to be cognizant of what your client's lifestyle is. If you're an athlete yourself, you need to be cognizant of why it is important. Ultimately, taking a nice, systematic, consistent approach is important. How you progress cardio, I will also talk about in another video, as well as the fasted versus non-fasted. That being said, if you like this information, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Fill out the link in my bio if you want to see what it would take to work with us, and I hope to see you on the next one.